So thanks everyone for joining us for Tech Tuesday. And so today we have Veronica joining us from UNDP, and she's very much acquainted with tech space and product development. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, but this is meant to be a relatively casual conversation. If you can put your camera on, we love to see your face. It makes it feel more collaborative, but we understand if you can't. Feel free while we're during the interview or any part of the session, just to put your questions in the chat. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions directly as well. And thank you for that, Dennis. It was escaping me very briefly what UNDP stood for, though I knew the United Nations was certainly in there. All right, so I'll just get started. So Veronica, she's an innovation strategist, a product development specialist, and co-founder with a track record of turning ideas into products that solve real problems. She's the co-founder of Caribbean Transit Solutions, and she developed BeatBus, which many of you may have heard of, Barbados's first transit app, and one of the first of its kind in the Caribbean. It was released in 2015 and empowered commuters with live route data, and changed how locals and tourists navigated public transportation across the island. So over the past decade, she's led the development and marketing of multiple mobile apps and platforms, scaling products to over 22,000 users and raising capital through crowdfunding, angel investors, and regional grants. Her work spans sectors including transportation tech, tourism, civic engagement, and data analytics, and she currently serves as head of exploration at the UNDP Accelerator Labs for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Veronica brings a unique blend of product management, marketing strategy, and global perspective to every project. She's passionate about helping others take bold ideas from concept to launch, and proving that you don't need to be a technical founder or build a unicorn even to create a lasting impact. So Veronica, since the theme of this particular session is building, can you just take us back to the beginning? What sparked your idea for your first product? How did you have the confidence to think that you could be the one to start building products?
Okay, it's funny. My first idea came way before CTS, Caribbean Transit Solutions. It actually came to me when I was maybe, and I don't want to lie, maybe 11 or 12 years old. And I just decided from a very young age I wanted to be a chef. I was fixated with culinary arts. I was obsessed. And I thought it just came to me that I needed to have a business. And I don't know necessarily where that came from because my parents were very, very traditional, like most Caribbean parents. One working in banking, one working in nursing. So very doctor, lawyer, bank manager-esque energy. But from a very young age, I always felt like, oh, this doesn't exist. I can create this. I can do this on my own. So that's where it started, this self-belief that you could create something out of nothing. With Caribbean Transit Solutions, CTS for short, my co-founder and I, Khalil Bryan, initially he was working with another partner. That was way in 2014. He and I had both lived in Barbados, worked in Barbados, worked outside of the Caribbean, traveled and studied outside of the Caribbean extensively. And he initially had the idea to build a bus platform. So that was just the very bare minimum. And it literally was as simple as, oh, there's this thing in North America or in Canada, as it were. And why can't we have it in Barbados? And literally, why not build it ourselves? It wasn't, why don't we have it? And why can't the government do it? It was, people shouldn't be standing in the hot sun, not knowing when the bus comes. This problem is solved in other places. We can solve it. And how about we solve it ourselves? And so he initially started the journey. And at that time, I was on break because I had just had a baby. And so I decided, of course, this is a perfect time to take a giant leap and go into a sector that I wasn't 100% versed in because it was definitely squarely tech at that time. But I knew I could market the hell out of it. And so we divided and conquered, and we launched the business with one product in 2015. And then we had a series of other products and platforms that we developed over the course of our 8-9 year life prior to exit but it was very much, here's an idea and why don't we create it? That's literally how we started. Why not us?
Wow. And that's super exciting, especially because a lot of us have ideas, right? So just the fact that you were positioned to have an idea, but also have an idea of how it could be built. Partnership is very
Yeah.
important. So how did you meet Khalil? I know you said that you were both working in Barbados. Was he a school
Yeah,
friend?
we knew each other from 11 years old.
Oh,
We met
wow.
at 11 years old at commerce school up and on. And so we were friends from that age. And so we just kept in touch. We're very close. He's my son's godfather. Like we are very good friends. And so when throughout life, if we were doing different projects or whatever, we would reach out to each other for input. And that's pretty much how we ended up as co-founders together, reaching out for input and help. And then it was, I am not working right now. I believe in this project. Here is where I see it going. And us sitting down and deciding, okay, we can do this and we can do this together because this is our skill set. This is my skill set. This is your skill set. But we were super strategic from the beginning. It wasn't just finger to the wind. We literally did our own personality assessments to make sure that we knew how each of us communicated with each other, what each of our kind of broad skill sets and advantages were. He is very much big think vision type, very much detail oriented, mission driven. So let's get it done. And so we realized that from the beginning, and that's how we mapped our business. And that's how we decided what each of us would focus on and how we would grow collectively as a company.
Yeah, that sounds very intentional. Because as we know, when you partner with anybody in any kind of project, there's going to be ups and downs. So being able to establish what your roles are and align on values is very important. So can you just tell us a little bit about the journey of BeatBus because it doesn't exist anymore? So just let us know what happened there, just what happened after it launched, basically.
Yeah, so we launched BeatBus, and BeatBus actually ended up being the genesis for our whole company. So we were very ambitious, young, zealous, exuberant. We can build anything, we can create anything we want. And so, in trying to capitalize BeatBus, we knew we needed to have an engine, we needed to have data. In order to give people real time information on buses, we needed a data driver. And so, in one of the many pitches that we did, a potential investor shared, well, okay, until you get the BeatBus platform going and monetize, why don't you also sell tracking, which is what you need to
Mm.
fund the data, to push the data into the bus system? So we thought, okay, of course we can do that. And in building out that business model, we saw a number of other opportunities, and we worked very early with Sagicor General Insurance. And we used that platform, that data insights and movement insights platform. We used that to launch the first ever usage-based insurance product launch in the Caribbean by any insurance company in conjunction with Sagicor General. So it comes back to BeatBus, I promise. But it started with BeatBus, then we realized we needed the tracking. Then in order to pay for all of that, we needed to make money. And so we started this fleet management business called EasyTrack. And that became the main economic driver for our company. That was our largest product, our service. That is what allowed us to scale throughout the Eastern Caribbean and be offered in multiple territories, offering fleet management and data analytics and data insights. And then, of course, in a really full circle way, it allowed us to get tracking on buses. So initially we thought, oh, we'll just get bus operators to do the tracking. That didn't work, but we didn't quit. We then said, okay, maybe from a local policy level, we'll get that done. That didn't really work, but we still knew we needed to have it. So we actually initially launched BeatBus without the real-time tracking because we knew the market just needed something. Even if we can give you static bus routes, let's do that. So we did everything very modularly. Okay, we can't, here's where we want to get, but we can't get here today. So where can we get today? Okay, we can get here. Then in the next 6 months, we'll go here and then we'll go here. So we were really strategic, really intentional when it came to BeatBus to make sure that we built the kind of stepping stones and building blocks to get to where we needed to get to, which was injecting that real-time information. And so we built a beta version that had static information. Then we built in some real-time information, because what EasyTrack allowed us to do through that partnership with Sagicor General is that at that time, the market was having a lot of issues with PSVs. Unfortunately, a young lady had lost her arm due to an incident that happened with a PSV. And so there was a lot of energy around regulating that sector. The government was working on other projects along that line. And so the insurance sector was really disrupted at that time. And some insurance companies actually weren't covering PSVs anymore. So it gave us the opportunity to launch a program with Sagicor where every PSV that they registered for insurance had to have tracking. So then that allowed us to first then build in real-time information into BeatBus. And that was maybe a year or two into our journey that we were able to build in the real-time information. But while we were doing that, because again, young and exuberant, we also launched a taxi booking app called Beat Cab at the time. We also launched other online platforms that would help manage the data that we were getting from all these apps and platforms. Because at our core, we were a data company. So these things were the engines for the data, but at our core, we were a data movement and insights company. And so BeatBus then over time evolved, because we then got PSVs that wanted by choice to join the tracking platform, because they realized, oh, so if my regular users know that I'm coming, then of course they would use the platform. So we did a local campaign to educate persons, because at that time adoption to applications wasn't great. In addition to that, a lot of people at that time, that was 2015 to 2018, I would say, people still had feature phones. Some people in Barbados did not have smartphones. And if they did have a smartphone, it was limited by how much the SD card or the internal memory was. So there were a lot of challenges around the operational logistics of applications. And so everybody thinks, oh, just build an app. But in the developing world and in SIDS, there are a lot of other things you have to consider. Like somebody might want to download your app, but they might have to delete half their camera roll in order to download their app. So are they going to do it? So that helped us to transition some of our platforms to having a web-based parallel. So persons can log on via the internet versus via a browser versus just downloading the app. So the evolution of BeatBus had many iterations. It was like every time we hit upon a challenge or a barrier, we would canvass the community, figure out how much of a challenge this was, how deeply did it impact people, and then pivot. So our motto for development was build, measure, learn. So we would release a branch, see how the market responded to it. If we needed to tweak it, re-release. So we had a number of versions until we sold, where we finally got up to a version that included passenger counters. It had a backend for bus drivers. You could add things associated with COVID, because in 2020, when COVID hit, there were max numbers on public transit. And so we were able to work with an IFI at the time, an international funding institution, to build out some of the features that we wanted to build out on BeatBus forever that would really help the public. And what we wanted to do prior to transitioning away from that space was have all the national buses on. But like most startups in the Caribbean, you hit barriers, you hit challenges, and administrations of governments change and things happen. And so you might have a plan here. Yes, we're going to work with you. And then something changes. But we always made sure that we had an adaptation or pivot plan. And so over the course of our life cycle, we were able to build out several versions. We were able to move from a semi-white labeled version to a proprietary version that we built out ourselves, and that we're proud to say was built out by its end by all Barbadians. So we had Barbadian talent. We had support of South African talent, but we had Barbadian talent in Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, Jordan, Oman. We had Barbadian talent. We found if there was a Bajan that was doing something disruptive or innovative in that space, we found them and we worked with them.
Okay, so that is so rich, and there's like several things that come to mind, but I do want to over a few themes. The first is I really love how you all were willing to take an incremental approach to progress with your app. So you didn't start with perfection in mind. You had a goal. Obviously, you were very product and user oriented, which is also incredibly important. So you were able to determine what are the features that you wanted? What do the users want? But you were willing to test and get it to what people would call maybe MVP, minimum viable product stage for each feature. And then just as you could get the data that you need or the functionality, test the market, but just keep rolling forward, which I think taking those risks is scary to a lot of people, but it's what really is incredibly important, the most important thing when it comes to launching apps from what we all have seen of many founder stories. And then there's also how you all were so flexible in pivoting. Like you launched this app, but then you were in partnership with Sagicor and then willing just to see how you keep using your data as the main product in different environments. So I think there's a lot of takeaways for our audience here as you can start building something and you may not actually fully understand what the most valuable part of that product is until you start building it and testing it with users. Getting over that hump, which is honestly probably the scariest thing for most people who want to build something or become a founder. So it's very inspirational to hear about this. So BeatBus, it sounds like it was still running during COVID. So what was it that was the catalyst for sunsetting BeatBus?
Our sale. At the time, over the course of our business, over those 8.5 and almost 9 years, we had ramped up products like the taxi booking. And as a first mover, it's always difficult. And every product that we built, we were the first mover. We were the first one in Barbados and first one in Caribbean in many cases to do what we did. And in many of those cases, the market wasn't ready. As a small company, as a company that was trying to move towards financial viability, we just knew we had a metric for everything. So we had a metric for when we needed to sunset our grandfather technology, our applications, our products that we built. And we had a metric matrix. And if it didn't meet those KPIs, then we knew, okay, within 3 months, 6 months, whatever time frame, we have to sunset this. That was the case with some of our other products, including BeatCab, but that wasn't the case with BeatBus. BeatBus, it was simply that when we had an offer to exit and we had an opportunity to sell or merge our company with another local company who did very similar business to ours, there wasn't the opportunity within that to continue with BeatBus. And as founders, we were pursuing other opportunities in private sector, in consulting, and actually in life. And so like everything else that we did, we were super strategic and we sat down as a group. By that time, our company had grown to 5 or 6 persons on the ground here in Barbados and a bunch of satellite persons in dev teams in Colombia, Jordan, and South Africa. And so we met as a team and decided, okay, what would it take for us to continue the apps and the software, the kind of development heavy pieces of our business? And what would financial viability look like? And then how long would it take us to get there and how much effort? And based on that metric at the time, because BeatBus was not able to monetize at the rate and bring in as much money as it needed to support the continuous dev needed on the platform, then we decided to sunset when we actually sold the business. But we still retain all the code. And so it's not always goodbye, it's maybe see you later. And maybe the market will be better for this in the future. But right now, we had made that decision when we sold in 2022 to sunset, 2023, to sunset the application over the course of that deal, which took maybe about 6 months.
Yeah, so is Caribbean Transit Solutions still operating today?
No, we sold. We had an exit.
Okay, so even the parent of BeatBus, Caribbean Transit Solutions, and all the data products were also sold as well?
No, theoretically, no. Mm-hmm. But we're no longer operational. So the main operational part of the business was sold. And so that was like the parent company, but we're not operational anymore.
Okay.
We still retain all that IP, but we're not operational.
Which is fantastic. Yeah, so for you personally, through this journey, and it was years, I'm sure you were evolving as far as your skill set and what you were passionate about. Just tell us how you've arrived where you are now when working with UNDP. What made you decide, hey, I'm no longer going to pursue being a founder or a co-founder, and I'd like to pivot back into, in this case, it's the public sector, but basically more of a traditional role with an organization.
Yeah. So for many years, I couldn't see myself ever pivoting into a traditional organization ever again. But as I continued within the Caribbean startup ecosystem, over the course of that almost decade, I realized how much work needed to be done at a very different level. So as a founder, there are only certain problems you can solve. You can, if you're lucky, you can solve the problems that you have reach or grasp of, which is mostly stuff that's in your company. And so for me, my passion is within the startup ecosystem and helping and building within the startup ecosystem in the Caribbean, because I don't think that we're lacking unicorns because we lack ideas. I am 1,000% confident that the Caribbean has all the ideas it needs to flourish already in existence, not just even in somebody's head, but in a pitch deck somewhere on someone's laptop or in the cloud. And so I've always been passionate. When we started our business, Khalil and I, our aim wasn't even about a product. Our aim was about helping and doing good in the region that we are from. And that was our passion. And CTS was just the vehicle to get us to that point. So it's not much of a deviation. For me, it was more of a natural progression in terms of doing what is part of your purpose. And I figured sometimes it's easier within the beast to make change than screaming on the outside. Because we spent a lot of time in that 9 years petitioning, working with government, working with IFIs, working with development agencies, working with charities, NGOs, tech companies, startups all over the world, and all these accelerators and incubators. And there's only so much headway you make there if you still have to return to a region that has gaps. And true to our model, if there's a gap, why can't I fix it? And that was the catalyst for my move into the development space. And I did a lot of soul searching. I worked with the company that we sold to in the transition of our team and of our clients to make sure that was a smooth transition. So I did that for just under a year, for about 9 months. And then I was confident that moving into the development space was where I wanted to be, because I wanted to make sure that I was helping founders just like myself 10 years ago in 2015, and that they had what they needed. And this opportunity with UNDP in their Accelerator Lab promoting the SDGs, which are paramount to SIDS in the region, just made sense. It was a natural progression for me.
Okay, so there's a lot of tech people in the tech industry on the call. So what should they know about the UNDP's accelerator programs?
So the UNDP's ACT Lab is not a traditional accelerator lab. So in the grand scheme of the startup world or the startup ecosystem, you have the incubator that helps you grow and experiment and test and create your beta tests, create your prototypes, create your MVPs, and then you go to the accelerator lab, which allows you to do just that, accelerate and launch pad your business to the next level and help with scale. The UNDP's version of Accelerator Labs is not that. It's a very different version with a very different format and a very different mandate. UNDP took the mandate 5-6 years ago to develop what they called Accelerator Labs, but the goal of those Accelerator Labs is to accelerate the development of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals that all the countries that are signed to the UN have agreed to over the course of now until 2030 is the deadline to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So we work with grassroots innovators across Barbados and the 10 territories in the Eastern Caribbean that we cover to help them, to support them in everything from pitches and business model canvassing to experiments and pilots to whatever supports governments need in digital transformation, scoping studies for blue economy. So we work in blue the blue economy, green economy, and AgriTech, anything that kind of touches digital innovation and cutting edge grassroots work. We work with helping those persons that may not have the same opportunities or may not make it to a traditional incubator or accelerator lab, meeting them where they're at. So most of the persons that we work with aren't even founders yet. So that's where we kind of land in the ecosystem support.
And how would anyone get on that radar or be considered for the accelerator?
This year actually marks the end of the Accelerator Lab program globally. There were 91 labs, there are 89 left. And the accelerator had a specific timeline. It was 5 years, and then I believe it was extended to 6. So we're in the last year, literally, of its existence, and persons can reach out directly. It just depends on what pillar of focus. Right now, we're doing a lot of work in digital. We're doing a lot of work we have a lot of experience in blue economy. We do some AgriTech work, but we don't, unfortunately, given all the changes in the development world, we don't have a huge budget this year, but that doesn't mean that we can't work or partner with you. A lot of what we do is connecting the ecosystem with the right persons. So our support is not just monetary. A lot of people assume, oh, you're in the development world, you're going to give me $50,000. That's not all we do. We offer our services as help and support for entrepreneurs and startups as well. So from that perspective, you can reach out to us. I can share my email address, but it depends. It depends on what your area of focus is, where you are in terms of your development, what countries you're working in. And part of what we do is creating a database of innovators throughout the region, so that if the government of X country says that they want somebody that does catering management platforms, that we can say, oh, Omar from Grenada has worked on something like that. Let me connect you and see how we can support in that way. So a lot of what we do is connecting persons within the region as well. So it would just be, typically we would do a challenge. In the past, we've done a challenge. A lot of what we do is supporting government. So government sets the tone and says, hey, here are the 10 things we need. And then we make those connections, or we design projects that will support those key needs of governments. So that's how we typically would get in touch with innovators, based on that, reaching out for very specific needs based on what the government of that territory wants. But yeah, it's through many sources. We've done challenges, open calls, direct reach outs to persons. Sometimes people contact us directly. Yeah, there are multiple routes that you can always reach out.
Okay, that's great to hear. And I would encourage anyone who has more questions or think they may be a candidate for connection or any other resource to reach out to Veronica via LinkedIn. So my final questions before opening it up to audience participation is really around what you said about how you see the Caribbean as having everything needed for digital innovation, and that you said that there's unicorns, potential unicorns for digital products in our midst. So what would your advice be to people who are potentially founders, have products that they want to build, to get on that path to potential unicorn status? What would you say to them where they are today?
I'll start by saying, yes, definitely we have everything we need. And I hate even using the term unicorn status because it's a very Silicon Valley word. And I feel like that doesn't apply to our region at all. And it's one of those chicken and egg things. They have unicorns because they have a full ecosystem and we don't. So we don't. But I would say, from a more positive outlook, that the pro and con of living in the global south, of living in the development world in our minute islands, is that we still have a lot of problems to solve. And many of us still occupy the spaces that the problems need to be solved in. And some of these problems have been solved in other places, and we can either create our own solutions or adapt them. So the same things that make it challenging to operate in the Caribbean, reframe those into opportunities. So if the challenge is around funding, what are the opportunities around funding? If the challenge is around data, what are the opportunities around data, and making sure you build out and create your own data sets and leverage what information already exists that might not directly align or doesn't seem like it has an obvious alignment, but what data is being collected that nobody cares about that's sitting in an Excel spreadsheet or on a Bitbucket repository somewhere that persons aren't using that maybe you can make some correlations on. So don't be afraid to try to build it yourself. And I don't say that lightly because I know it's hard. I know very much firsthand that it's difficult. And when you're trying to pay your bills and you're trying to support your family, it's hard to say, okay, I'm just going to go head first into this. And a lot of persons tell you, oh, don't work and do your business. You got to quit and do it full time. That comes from a gaze that I think doesn't take into consideration life in the development world and the fact that many of us don't have a pre-seed round. We don't have a friends and family round. What is that? But I would say to encourage everyone, don't think that your idea is too small. If you thought about it, and if the catalyst of the idea is not just finger to the wind, I think that we should create applications to figure out where your dog can pee. No, I'm not talking about finger to the wind solutions. I'm talking about you're walking down the street and you see a bottleneck. You're accessing medical services and you see a challenge. You are doing whatever you do in your daily life and you see a challenge. Your idea has legs as long as it's something that solves a real problem that not just one or two persons have, but maybe 10,000 people have. And maybe if you do research in 10 other countries in the Eastern Caribbean, another 50,000 people have, and not thinking that our space is too small to solve a problem, but looking and considering that the addressable market is not just Barbados, it's not just the Eastern Caribbean, it's the entire global south, because the blessing and the curse of us all being developing countries is that we all have the same problems. So sub-Saharan Africa, same problems. The Caribbean, same problems. And so don't think your idea is too small. I would say business model, canvas it out and sit down and really critique it, really sit down and think, okay, so this is a problem in St. George. Is this also a problem in St. Lucie? Is this also a problem for Barbados? Is this also a problem for the Eastern Caribbean? Is this also a problem for Lagos? Is this also a problem for Ghana? And build out your stuff from that perspective. Don't think small because we are small, and don't think that your idea doesn't have weight because you don't have the money for it. The ecosystem is changing, and with so many things happening behind the scenes in the IFI world, the development world, and with regional governments, I'm confident it will continue to change. And a lot of those ecosystem builders are coming. They're coming. I know it feels like forever, but they're coming. And be encouraged, work hard, do what you need to do to survive, even if that means pivot, even if that means to put something down, especially if that means, because as founders or entrepreneurs or innovation minded, disruptive people, we have 15 business plans. We have 15 ideas at any one time. Niche it down. That was a critique we got 10 years ago and didn't want to follow. And what did we have to do in order to become profitable, to transition from the red to the green, to being successful, to having over 2 million US in sales, was to put down some things. And because these things are our babies and we're so precious with them, sometimes we don't want to put them down, but don't be afraid of failure to the tune that you miss the forest for the trees. And let's reframe this concept of failure. Because you launched a product and it didn't work doesn't mean you don't launch a product. When you were learning to walk, you fell down, but you still tried again. If you mess up today at work, you're still going to come to work tomorrow. So let's dismantle all these ideas around fear and failure and smallness, and just be encouraged and work hard and partner. Don't be afraid to partner. I think that's the only way we win, if we partner together. I know we're very closed off and we're like, oh, somebody's going to steal my idea. Partnership is the key in this region. Regionalization and partnership, I think, are the keys.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of gems there. Hopefully people have things that they're chewing on and will take away from the conversation and perhaps action even. Really fantastic advice, and your story is really inspirational, Veronica. I appreciate you sharing. I did want to open this up for questions. So if anybody just has any initial thoughts they want to share, please do. You can raise your hand or just, yeah, let us know. I see Omar physically raised his hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I definitely agree with some of the stuff you said about back in the day when you're trying to launch a digital product and the market just not being there, especially the technology. I had the same situation where I had some ideas, but then people either didn't have the phone technology to consume them, or maybe they did have the phones, but the cost of using internet data was too high. And that's another massive barrier. And I think one of the things that I thought at the time was but alongside focusing on the products to solve the problems, I think you mentioned it just now as well. We need to create an ecosystem to actually consume them. So I think maybe some work needs to be done as far as getting the technology into the hands of people, educating the people on how to use the technology, making the technology cheaper, more accessible, especially things to the internet. I live in Scotland and you get like unlimited data for pennies. And you could go back to Barbados and spending like $125 for 16 gig cap or something like that. It's absolutely crazy to me. But one of the things that the modern day person as a developer has to face is, but for me anyway, I think one of the biggest challenges that I find as a stumbling block or a barrier to get past when it comes to building a product now is data protection and the different data laws and the acts and that kind of thing, and the fear that you're going to fall afoul of some of these things because the acts are obviously legal documents and they're quite intensive and especially living in the UK and in Europe, if you do the wrong thing, there's some serious fines and some serious reputation damage that you can suffer. So I'm wondering if the UNDP, the development program, you said they offer resources and that kind of thing. Is that one of the things that they can help aspiring? 'Cause obviously, if, as a developer, you're a developer. You're not a lawyer. You're not necessarily someone who is au fait with all the different apps and that kind of thing. You just want to build a product. But at the same time, you don't want to expose people's data unwittingly or build insecure products. So is that something that the UNDP would help with as far as providing expertise in that area to work with you while you focus on building the product and you can lean on some other person on a consulting basis to make sure you're following all the right steps when it comes to GDPR and data protection and that kind of thing?
In the space, this particular space, and I work in a very small space, so let me caveat that. In the particular small corner of UNDP that I operate in, I guess the short answer is no. How development agencies typically work is on a project basis. So I would say for a longer form answer, if there was a project around that specific ask, then the answer would be yes. But I don't know of any such projects right now, and definitely not within my corner of UNDP with the Accelerator Lab. No, we don't currently have a program specifically for that. But that's not to say that there never will be a program, a workshop, or anything like that. But from a personal past level, I leaned on local resources for that support. There are other agencies like SBA and other resources, Send Habitat, even other incubator type spaces that actually helped us with that. That put on, we did a lot of networking. We made sure we registered for almost every networking type agency that was built to help startups locally and regionally, and many even internationally, so that we can leverage those networks to get the value that you're speaking of very directly. And thankfully, we were able to still get that, but get that from those spaces that are designed specifically for that. So we literally, when GDPR was released in the EU, there was a whole series that was done here on GDPR, its impact on businesses, its impact on startups. If you have an app, what language do you now need to build into your terms of reference and your privacy policies and all these things for websites and so on. So we were able to leverage a lot of those resources on the ground. I know you said you're based in Scotland. I don't know if there are any agencies like that or spaces. I'm sure there are networking spaces or co-working spaces or incubator accelerator type spaces that offer those kinds of resources. But that is how we did that as a business when I did have my company. I leveraged the Chamber of Commerce. They're the ones that had put on that GDPR specific training. There were other agencies that put on training around taxation and legalization. And then as we grew, we actually hired a legal team. So that's how we were able to get around some of those pitfalls, because as an entrepreneur, you don't have that. Like you very well said, you don't have that skill set. You're not a lawyer. But it's about looking for these spaces where those niche, very specific things exist. And within the UNDP space, like I said, everything is project-based. Everything is based on a particular thematic area, depending on the region. So every year, everything won't be covered. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for that, and thanks, Omar. Does anybody else have any comments or questions based on what you've heard today?
Someone else just raised their hand. I'm trying to see.
Yeah, I would love to.
Brendan.
Yeah. Hello, Veronica. Thank you for what was an abundance of knowledge, clearly distilled and filtered through experience, both in business and regional lenses. So it was great to hear you today. Thank you for the time. I'm curious what direction, what opportunities you're keeping an eye on for yourself based on your interests and your experience. Yeah, where are you finding yourself most interested in looking at opportunities these days in the region?
I think HealthTech and AgriTech are at the top of the list for me. A lot of countries are already working on renewable energy. A lot of countries are working on water resilience. And I think those are the other two. I feel like those were the top two waves of the last decade. And I think HealthTech and AgriTech are the next two waves. So HealthTech and AgriTech are the two that I'm most focused on right now in terms of consuming. When I say focused on, what I consume most globally and regionally and in sub-Saharan Africa, all the technological innovation and disruptive platforms that are coming out around health tech, especially as we look at global trends of aging populations, rising demand for healthcare, international policy changes by country based on some countries were more public based, the health infrastructure was more of a public good, whereas some countries are moving more towards privatization of healthcare. And I think health tech is a area that is ripe for disruption right now. And I think in the Caribbean, we're trying to position ourselves. And I see a lot of really exciting policy shifts and changes and ecosystem building networks popping up around health tech. And I see some exciting potential connections with Ghana and Lagos, which are like epicenters of innovation in Western Africa. And so I feel like this is a really good transitional time for the region. And then in AgriTech, just plainly because of food security, similar to the water and solar issues of before, we know we have limited water. We know we need renewable energy. I think now everybody is trying to focus more on AgriTech. What does that look like from a regional perspective, especially with all the current issues that we're seeing globally? If movement was limited to our region, how would we feed ourselves? And I think that creates a huge opportunity. I know everybody's freaking out, oh my God, it's a challenge. But for me, I think anywhere that there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. And there's probably an amazing opportunity in the global south that somebody from the global south is the perfect person to solve. And so those are the spaces that I'm consuming a lot of information about.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. It's really exciting, Veronica. And I think a lot of people's wheels are probably turning on the call. So we have time for one more question. So Jason, go ahead.
Hi. So my question, I put it in the chat, and it's about the MVP. So as developers, when you envision a product, you always see that what it will look like towards the end, and that can put developers in development hell for the app. So my question is, how soon would you know to launch your MVP before you think it's actually ready? Because sometimes we self-sabotage ourselves trying to perfect the app. So if you have 10 different features you want to launch, sometimes we're not satisfied when we reach 7. So that's a little insight on that.
Yeah, sure, Jason. This is a fantastic question. And me 10 years ago would have had a very different answer than today. Me 10 years ago would have said, oh gosh, we have to get close to perfection. Me today knows without a shadow of a doubt, you don't need to be close to perfection. You need to be willing to be nimble, because imagine waiting till you're close to 10 steps. So you're at 7, it's viable, it's workable. I'm not saying put out stuff that's broken. So you know that 7 out of steps will still get you what the market needs, will still solve the market problem. Imagine waiting till 10 When you put it out at 7, you would have learned 2 things about your UI that you could have fixed in that same 6 months that it would have taken you to finish it till 10. So I think it's weighing the cost of, you termed it development hell, but weighing the cost of implementation deficit disorder. We used to joke about it, and putting your baby out into the world and seeing what comes back. Don't be afraid to fall, because it's not a failure, it's a test. If we're talking MVPs, this is a test. It's still a beta test. Put it out in beta, tell people it's in beta, and I think most importantly, get a partner. So having led development teams all over and being that person that had to say to the development team, stop, just stop, let's release. I know that the developer is not the right person to launch your product. It's too precious. It's too close to home. You want to keep it. You've built this from ground up. The code is like running through your brain at night. Partner with somebody who can pull the trigger and understands how to talk to the public, and not talk, no disrespect, not talk to the public in developer speak. Talk to the public in plain, basic terms. So I would say, partner with somebody that has the business acumen to help you with that release, and make sure the language around that release is in line with what you are comfortable with, the status of your app. So if you know it's 7 out of 10, but that 6 out of that 7 meets what the market said you were building this app to do anyway, tell the market that we're launching our MVP. It's in beta. We want to get 10,000 people to test it. We want to get 20 people to test it. Tell us, give us the feedback. I find the public is more responsive when you start with your hands raised and say, hey, I know this is not perfect. I'm not trying to give you a polished version. This is exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving you this test. Tell me where it's bad. Tell me where we need work. And then you use that feedback to get to 10. And I think it will be a more valuable 10, because you might realize, oh, I don't need 9, but I do need 11.
Thank you so much.
Yes, very valuable advice there for a lot of us who are at some stage of building something, just to let it go, let the baby roam around for a while. Okay, so we've come to the end of our session. Before we fully end, I just wanted to ask if anybody had any announcements, anything that they want the group to know, or anything that they need.
Thank you. I'll take a moment. I am arranging a hackathon with the local educational institution here in Grenada. If anybody has experience or interest in those types of events, please feel free to reach out. And also our local community, as Veronica hit on, of farmers as well as hospitality, are looking to build some sort of an agricultural simplified solution to improve communication between the providers and the consumers. So if either a hackathon or that ag communication tool are of interest, please feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp or email, which are in the chat.
Okay, that's great. So the only announcement I have from the DX Alliance is that we would like you to nominate other people who could be featured on a Tech Tuesday call like this. Dennis is going to put that link in the chat. Feel free to nominate others that you would like to see featured, who have some ties to the region and have maybe built a product or doing something that is tech related and helping others in some way. All right, so that was fantastic, Veronica. We really enjoyed you sharing a lot of valuable information. And again, please reach out to her on LinkedIn if you have any questions or would like to connect. All right.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
I really appreciate everyone taking the time out at lunchtime today. It's been great.
Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.